The year is 114 before Common Era. The city is Rome. A young woman named Emilia is being led in a solemn procession through the crowded streets. The mood is not festive. It is suffocatingly silent. She is dressed in the heavy woolens of a high priestess, but her face is pale, drained of blood. The procession stops at the Culling Gate, where a small, dark set of stairs leads underground. Emilia does not scream. She does not fight. She descends the stairs into a small, cold chamber containing a bed, a lamp, and a loaf of bread. Then, the stairs are pulled up. The entrance is sealed with earth. She is left to suffocate in the dark, buried alive. Her crime was not murder. It was not treason. Her crime was the loss of something invisible, something that history would come to weaponize more than any sword. Her crime was the loss of her virginity. For the Romans, the safety of the entire empire rested on the bodies of 6 women, the Vestal virgins. If they remained pure, Rome would stand. If they fell, Rome would burn. But why? How did human history arrive at a point where the fate of nations was pinned to the private lives of women? To understand this, we have to peel back thousands of years of shame, religion, and control. We have to uncover a secret that historians and sociologists have long known but rarely say out loud. Virginity was not discovered, it was invented. To see the original meaning of the word, we must travel back even further, before the walls of Rome were built, to the wild forests of ancient Greece. Here, we find Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. She was known as the Great Virgin, but the word didn't mean what you think it means today. In the ancient world, the term did not signify a woman who had never known a man. It meant a woman who was one in herself. It meant she was autonomous. She belonged to no husband, no father, and no master. Virginity was originally a declaration of freedom, a symbol of a woman who stood complete without a partner. It was power, not passivity. So, when did the meaning flip? When did the virgin go from being a wild, independent force to a fragile object that could be broken, stolen, or lost? The answer lies not in morality, but in the dirt. It begins with the agricultural revolution and the invention of private property. Before humans settled down to farm, land was shared, resources were communal. But once men began to fence off plots of land, accumulate herds of cattle, and build stone houses, a new anxiety was born. A man who spent his life accumulating wealth wanted to pass it down to his own flesh and blood. He needed an heir. But in a world without DNA tests, there was only one way a man could be absolutely certain that a child was his. He had to control the womb of the mother. Suddenly, a woman's sexual history was no longer her own business. It was a matter of economics. Virginity became the seal on a contract. It was the guarantee that the product, the capacity to produce heirs, had not been tampered with. The hymen became a receipt of value. If a bride was not a virgin, the lineage was at risk, the inheritance was uncertain, and the property lines were blurred. The purity culture we know today was born here, in the anxiety of ancient farmers, terrified of leaving their grain to another man's son. As empires grew, this economic necessity was painted over with the gold leaf of religion. The rules of inheritance were rewritten as the will of the gods. In the great monotheistic traditions, and in the empires that rose in the East and West, the female body became a battleground between good and evil. This is where the Madonna-Whore complex was forged. It is a psychological split that categorizes women into 2 distinct, impossible boxes: the pure, saintly mother who sustains the community, and the dangerous sexual woman who threatens it. This wasn't just about theology, it was about social stability. In medieval Europe, and across the Islamic Golden Age, the virginity of daughters became a currency of honor for their fathers and brothers. A family's reputation, their credit score in the community, depended on the sexual status of their women. To lose virginity outside of marriage was to bankrupt the family's honor. This is why the punishments were so severe. It wasn't just a sin, it was viewed as a form of social vandalism. But there is a dark irony here, one that modern science exposes. While societies spent centuries obsessed with the physical proof of purity, the breaking of the hymen biology, tells us that such proof is largely a myth. The hymen is not a freshness seal. It can be worn away by athletics, by injury, or it may barely exist at all. For thousands of years, women were condemned, cast out, or even executed based on a biological misunderstanding. Wars were started, and dynasties fell over a piece of anatomy that proves almost nothing. The obsession reached its peak in the Victorian era, where the appearance of purity became a performance. Women were taught to faint, to be frail, to be entirely ignorant of their own biology. This was the ultimate victory of the invention. The autonomous, wild power of Artemis had been completely erased, replaced by the fainting damsel who needed protection. Virginity had transformed from a state of being complete unto oneself to a state of being unfinished, waiting for a man to complete the story. We like to think we have moved past this. We live in a modern world of science and liberation. But look closely at our language. We still speak of women losing their virginity, as if it is a possession that diminishes them when it is gone. We rarely speak of men losing something. They take it. The economic language of the ancient farmers is still on our tongues. We still see the sexual autonomy of young women as a source of moral panic, while the sexual history of young men is treated as a rite of passage. The Vestal Virgin Amelia died in the dark because her society believed her body held the spiritual weight of the entire empire. It was a crushing, impossible burden. Today, we may not bury women alive for their choices, but we still ghost them, shame them, and measure their worth by an ancient, invented metric. The history of virginity is not a history of morality. It is a history of property, inheritance, and control. It is the story of how half the human race was convinced that their value lay not in their mind, their heart, or their actions, but in what they had or hadn't done with their bodies. Perhaps it is time to return to the forest, to remember the older definition, to realize that a human being is not a commodity to be used or saved, but a complete, autonomous world, belonging wholly to themselves.